You really don't remember last night, do you? The woman standing in Marcus Cole's kitchen wore his white dress shirt like armor, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs, not because a stranger had invaded his home, but because his 7-year-old daughter was giggling at her like they were old friends. He had no memory of bringing anyone home. The couch beneath him was damp with sweat, his hands scratched and bruised. Outside, the morning sun revealed a city drowned by last night's storm. And in his kitchen, this woman, polished, controlled, dangerous, held a coffee mug like she owned his entire world. What had he done? Before you find out how a single act of humanity destroyed and rebuilt 2 lives, I invite you to follow my story to the very end. Like and comment about the city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey reaches. The storm had come without mercy. Marcus Cole stood at the window of his cramped living room, watching sheets of rain hammer the glass like fists demanding entry. The power had been flickering for the past hour, on, off, casting his daughter's drawings on the refrigerator in and out of shadow. Ava sat at the kitchen table behind him, humming while she colored, her legs swinging beneath the chair, too short to reach the floor. "Daddy, is the lightning gonna get us?" Marcus turned, softening his expression before she could see the worry. "No, baby, we're safe in here." But safe was a relative term. Safe didn't pay the rent that was 3 weeks overdue. Safe didn't fix the fact that his engineering degree was gathering dust while he patched drywall and unclogged toilets for landlords who barely looked at him. Safe didn't explain how a man who once designed infrastructure for entire neighborhoods now lived paycheck to paycheck in an apartment building that smelled like mildew and broken promises. The lightning flashed, turning the world white for a split second. Ava squealed, more delighted than frightened. "See?" Marcus said, forcing a smile. "Just light, nothing scary." "Can we have hot chocolate?" "We're out of milk, sweetheart." Her face fell just enough to gut him. He made a mental note to pick some up tomorrow, even if it meant walking an extra 2 miles to the cheaper grocery store. His car had died 4 months ago. The repair cost more than the car was worth, so now he carried groceries on foot and pretended the exercise was good for him. The lights cut out completely. "Daddy?" "I'm right here." He fumbled for the flashlight he kept on the shelf near the door, clicked it on, and swept the beam across the room. Ava's eyes caught the light, wide and trusting. "We're good. Just a little blackout." "Like an adventure?" "Exactly like an adventure." He moved to the window again, peering through the downpour. The street below was a river now, trash cans bobbing past like makeshift boats. The storm drains couldn't keep up. They never could in this part of town, the forgotten part, where infrastructure meant nothing more than asphalt that cracked a little slower than the people who walked on it. Then he saw the headlights. They were weaving, too fast, erratic. The car, a sleek luxury sedan that had no business in this neighborhood, hydroplaned across the flooded intersection, fishtailed, and slammed sideways into the old oak tree at the corner. The sound of impact was a sickening crunch, metal folding like paper, glass exploding outward in a glittering spray. Marcus was already moving. "Ava, stay right there. Do not leave this apartment." "Daddy, where are you?" "Stay here." He didn't wait for her response. He grabbed his jacket, shoved his feet into boots, and bolted out the door. The rain hit him like a wall, cold and unrelenting, soaking through his clothes before he made it down the first flight of stairs. His boots splashed through ankle-deep water as he ran toward the wreck. Smoke poured from the hood. The tree had split the front end nearly in half, the engine block shoved backward into the cabin. The driver's side was crumpled, airbag deployed and deflated. And inside, a woman. She was slumped against the steering wheel, her face pale, blood trickling from a gash above her eyebrow. Her eyes fluttered open as Marcus reached the door, and she tried to move, panic flaring across her features. "Don't move!" Marcus shouted over the rain. "I'm getting you out!" The door was jammed. He pulled, braced his foot against the frame, pulled harder. The metal groaned but held. The smoke was thickening now, darker, angrier. He could smell gasoline. "The door won't open," she gasped, her voice tight with pain and fear. I can't get out." "Yes, you can. Hold on." Marcus ran back to his building, his mind racing. He needed something heavy, something to break the window. The toolbox in his apartment. He kept a hammer there. He took the stairs 3 at a time, burst through the door. Ava screamed, "It's me! It's me!" He grabbed the hammer from the box under the sink. "Daddy's helping someone. Stay inside." He didn't give her time to argue. Back down the stairs, back into the rain, back to the car. The smoke was pouring out now, black and oily. Flames licked at the edges of the hood. Marcus swung the hammer. The window shattered on the second hit, safety glass spraying inward. He cleared the edges with the hammer's claw, reached inside and fumbled for the seatbelt. The woman was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me," Marcus said, his voice steady even as his hand shook. "I've got you." The seatbelt was jammed in the mechanism. He sawed at it with the edge of the hammer, fabric tearing thread by thread. The flames were spreading, crawling along the underside of the hood like living things. "Come on! Come on!" The belt gave way. Marcus grabbed her under the arms and pulled. She cried out in pain, but he didn't stop. He dragged her through the window, her body limp and unresponsive, her expensive suit soaked and torn. He got her clear of the car, pulled her across the flooded street, and laid her down on the sidewalk just as the fuel tank ignited. The explosion knocked him backward. Heat washed over him, singeing his eyebrows, turning the rain to steam. The car was a fireball now, flames roaring into the night sky. Marcus shielded the woman's body with his own, feeling the heat on his back, hearing the metal pop and scream as it melted. Then, silence. Just the rain and the crackle of dying flames. Marcus rolled onto his side, gasping for air. The woman beside him coughed, her eyes blinking open, unfocused. She stared at him like she didn't understand what had happened, like the world had been rewritten in a language she couldn't read. "You're okay," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure that was true. "You're safe." Her lips moved. No sound came out. He looked around. The street was deserted. No one had come to help. No one had even opened a window. In this neighborhood, people learned not to get involved. Marcus pulled out his phone, checked for a signal. Nothing. The cell towers were down. He tried 911 anyway. The call failed. "Okay," he muttered to himself. "Okay, think." The hospital was 12 miles away. The roads were flooded. Even if he could get a car, which he couldn't, they'd never make it through. The fire station was closer, but still too far in this weather. He looked down at the woman. Her breathing was steady now, but she was shivering, her skin clammy and pale. Shock, probably. Maybe a concussion. Definitely hypothermia if he left her out here. He made the only decision he could. "I'm taking you inside," he said, even though she probably couldn't hear him. "Just until the road's clear." He lifted her, she was lighter than he expected, all sharp angles and expensive fabric, and carried her toward his building. The stairs were a nightmare, his legs burned by the time he reached the 3rd floor. Ava stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "Daddy? Who is she?" "She was in an accident. She needs help." "Is she gonna die?" "No, baby. She's not gonna die." He carried the woman to his bedroom, the only real bed in the apartment, and laid her down gently. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing shallow but steady. He grabbed a towel, dried her face and hands, checked for broken bones. Nothing obvious. The gash on her forehead had stopped bleeding. He covered her with his only blanket, the threadbare one with the hole in the corner. Ava appeared in the doorway. "Can I help?" "Yeah, get me the first aid kit from under the bathroom sink." She ran off, her footsteps light and quick. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, watching the woman breathe. Up close, even soaked and injured, she looked expensive. Her suit was tailored, the kind that cost more than Marcus made in a month. Her nails were manicured. Her jewelry, a thin gold bracelet, a watch with a face too elegant to be cheap, screamed money. What the hell was she doing in this neighborhood? Ava returned with the kit. Marcus cleaned the wound on the woman's forehead, applied antibiotic ointment, covered it with a bandage. He checked her pulse. Strong. He checked her pupils. Reactive. She was stable. For now. "Is she going to wake up?" Ava whispered. "Eventually. She just needs rest." "Can I stay with her?" "No, baby. You need to sleep." "But what if she gets scared?" Marcus looked at his daughter, her eyes full of concern for a stranger. "You're a good kid, you know that?" Ava smiled, shy and proud. He walked her back to her room, The tiny closet he'd converted with a mattress on the floor and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and waited until her breathing slowed into sleep. Then he returned to the living room, sank onto the couch, and let the exhaustion hit him all at once. His clothes were still damp. His hands were shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a hollow ache in his chest. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain, wondering if he'd just made a terrible mistake. But what else could he have done? He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, sunlight was streaming through the window and someone was making coffee. Marcus jolted upright, his heart slamming into his throat. He turned toward the kitchen and froze. The woman stood there, wearing his white dress shirt and nothing else, her legs bare, her hair mussed but somehow perfect. She moved with the ease of someone who belonged, pouring coffee into his chipped mug like this was her kitchen, her home, her world. She looked up, met his gaze, and smiled. "You really don't remember last night, do you?" Marcus's mouth went dry. He looked down at himself, same clothes, same couch, no memory gap that he could recall. But the way she said it, the knowing glint in her eyes, made him doubt everything. What? She tilted her head, amused. "You saved my life, dragged me out of a burning car, brought me here. Does that ring a bell, or were you sleepwalking through the whole thing?" The memories clicked into place, the crash, the fire, the hospital being too far. "I remember," he said slowly. "I just didn't expect you to be, up. And making coffee in your shirt?" "That too." She took a sip from the mug, her eyes never leaving his. "You're Marcus, right? Your daughter told me." "Ava talked to you?" "She's very chatty, also very concerned about whether I was a ghost." Despite everything, Marcus almost smiled. "That sounds like her." "She's sweet. You've done well." The compliment landed wrong, too familiar, too presumptive. Marcus stood, suddenly aware of how small his apartment was, how threadbare the couch, how the light from the window showed every crack in the plaster. "You should sit down. You were in a bad accident." "I feel fine." "You have a concussion." "Do I?" "Probably." She set the mug down, her expression shifting, less playful, more assessing. "You didn't take me to a hospital." Roads were flooded, phones were down. This was the safest option. Safest for who? The question hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Marcus met her gaze, refusing to flinch. "For you." She studied him for a long moment, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit her usual logic. Then she reached into the pocket of his shirt, her fingers brushing the fabric like it was silk instead of cotton, and pulled out a stack of bills. Hundreds. Thick enough to choke on. She set it on the table between them. "For your trouble." Marcus stared at the money. It was more than he'd seen in months, enough to pay rent, enough to fix the car, enough to buy Ava new shoes and a winter coat that actually fit, enough to breathe for the first time in a year. He picked it up. She smiled, satisfied. And then he shoved it back into her hands. "No." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "I don't want your money. Everyone wants money." "I'm not everyone." Her eyes narrowed, the warmth draining out of them like water down a broken drain. "You pulled me out of a burning car. You brought me into your home. You gave me your bed. And now you're refusing payment?" "I didn't do it for payment." "Then why did you do it?" Marcus took a step closer, his voice low and steady. "Because you were dying. Because I could help. Because it was the right thing to do. Not everything's a transaction." The words hit her like a slap. Her jaw tightened, her fingers curled around the bills, crumpling them. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack." For a moment, neither of them moved. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Ava stirring in her room. The woman, whoever she was, looked at Marcus like he was speaking a foreign language, like decency was a currency she'd never learned to trade in. "You're making a mistake," she said finally. "I've made plenty. This isn't one of them." She opened her mouth to argue, but Ava appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, is the pretty lady staying for breakfast?" The woman's expression shifted again, softening in a way that looked almost painful. "I should go." "You don't have a car," Marcus pointed out. "I'll call someone." "With what phone?" She hesitated, clearly unused to being without resources. Then I'll walk. In a dress shirt and no shoes? Her jaw clenched. She looked like she wanted to argue, to assert control, to do anything other than admit she was trapped here by circumstance and a stubborn man who refused to play by her rules. Fine, she said tightly. I'll stay for breakfast. But then I'm leaving. Fine. Marcus turned toward the kitchen, his hands still shaking slightly, his heart still pounding. He had no idea who this woman was, but he knew one thing for certain. She was used to getting her way. And he'd just told her no. That was going to cost him. He just didn't know how much yet. Ava climbed onto a chair, swinging her legs, watching the woman with unfiltered curiosity. What's your name? The woman hesitated, like even that was a secret worth guarding. Celine. That's pretty, like the moon. Something like that. Marcus cracked eggs into a pan, the sizzle loud in the quiet kitchen. He could feel Celine's eyes on his back, measuring, calculating. He didn't turn around. You live here alone? Celine asked. With my daughter. No partner? Not anymore. Divorce? Death. The word landed heavy. Marcus didn't elaborate. He didn't owe her his story, his grief, his carefully rebuilt life. He just flipped the eggs and tried not to think about how much worse things were going to get. Because women like Celine didn't just walk away, they paid their debts, and Marcus had just refused the payment. That meant the debt was still open, and debts, in his experience, always came due. The eggs were runny. Marcus had overcooked them yesterday and undercooked them today, his mind too fractured to focus on something as simple as breakfast. He slid them onto 3 mismatched plates, one with a chip in the rim, one that didn't quite match the set, and Ava's plastic Disney plate with Elsa's face half faded from too many washes. Celine stared at her plate like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. You don't have to eat it, Marcus said, setting down a fork that had seen better decades. But it's what we've got. Ava was already shoveling eggs into her mouth, humming between bites. She'd inherited her mother's ability to find joy in small things, a trait Marcus both loved and envied. Celine picked up her fork with the delicacy of someone handling evidence, took a small bite, and chewed slowly. It's good, she said, and it sounded like a lie wrapped in politeness. It's edible, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. Ava giggled. Daddy's not a good cooker. Cook, Marcus said automatically. And I'm good enough. Celine set down her fork, her gaze drifting around the apartment with the kind of slow assessment that made Marcus's skin prickle. She was cataloging everything, the water stain on the ceiling, the duct tape holding the couch cushion together, the stack of overdue bills on the counter that he'd shoved under a dish towel but hadn't quite hidden. He watched her eyes pause on Ava's drawings taped to the refrigerator, stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun, the word daddy written in purple crayon with the second D backward. How long have you lived here? Celine asked. 3 years. And before that? Different place. Same story. Her eyes flicked to his. Which is? Marcus picked up his coffee, instant, no cream, because cream was a luxury, and took a long sip before answering. I used to be an engineer, designed infrastructure for commercial developments, shopping centers, office complexes, that kind of thing. Then my wife got sick, cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. I took time off to be with her. Then she died, and when I tried to go back, the firm had moved on, hired someone younger, cheaper, without the baggage. He said it flatly, like reciting directions to a place he didn't want to visit. Celine's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. So you became a handyman. I became whatever paid the bills. That's a significant fall. It's called life. Ava, oblivious to the tension thickening the air, piped up. Daddy fixes everything. He fixed Mrs. Chen's toilet and Mr. Ramirez's door and the broken step that made Mrs. Washington fall. Sounds like you're valuable, Celine said, but the word valuable came out clinical, like she was appraising livestock. Marcus set down his mug, harder than he intended. I do what needs doing, that's it. Celine leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs, and Marcus caught himself noticing the way his shirt rode up her thigh before he forced his gaze elsewhere. She smiled, slow and knowing. You're angry with me. I'm not angry. You are, because I offered you money. I'm not angry. I just don't need your guilt disguised as gratitude. Her smile vanished. That's not what it was. Wasn't it? The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Ava looked between them, her fork hovering midair, sensing the shift but not understanding it. Celine's jaw tightened, and for a moment Marcus thought she might push back, might defend herself with the kind of corporate smoothness that turned arguments into negotiations. But instead, she stood. I should go. You said that already. This time I mean it. Marcus didn't stop her. He watched as she moved toward the door, barefoot, still wearing his shirt, her dignity somehow intact despite everything. She paused with her hand on the knob, her back to him. Thank you, she said quietly, for saving my life. You already tried to pay me for that. I'm not paying you now. I'm thanking you. There's a difference. Marcus didn't respond. After a moment, Celine opened the door and stepped into the hallway. He heard her footsteps fade, heard the stairwell door creak open and shut, then silence. Ava tugged on his sleeve. Is she coming back? I don't think so, baby. I liked her. Yeah, Marcus said, staring at the closed door. Me too. But liking someone and trusting them were two different things, and Marcus had learned the hard way that people with money didn't thank you, they owned you. Celine's gratitude would come with strings. It always did. He just hadn't expected the strings to show up 3 days later. The knock on the door came at 7 in the evening, sharp and authoritative. Marcus was helping Ava with her homework, third-grade math that somehow required more patience than engineering ever had, when the sound echoed through the apartment. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Stay here, he told Ava, and moved to the door. He opened it to find 2 men in dark suits standing in the hallway. They had the look of professionals. Tailored clothes, neutral expressions, hands clasped in front of them, like they were guarding something precious. Behind them stood Celine. She'd traded his white shirt for a black power suit that probably cost more than his rent. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup flawless, her entire presence radiating control. She looked like a different person. No, she looked like the person she actually was, and the woman who'd stood in his kitchen making coffee had been the anomaly. Mr. Cole, she said, her voice smooth and businesslike. May we come in? Marcus didn't move. What's this about? I'd prefer to discuss it inside. I'd prefer you tell me now. One of the men shifted slightly, a subtle movement that Marcus read as impatience. Celine noticed too. She raised a hand, a gesture that said, stand down, and the man froze. I owe you a debt, Celine said. I'm here to settle it. I told you I don't want your money. I know. That's why I brought something else. Against his better judgment, Marcus stepped aside. Celine entered first, her heels clicking on the worn linoleum, her eyes sweeping the apartment with the same assessing gaze as before. The 2 men followed, standing by the door like sentries. Ava peeked out from the kitchen, her eyes wide. It's okay, baby, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure that was true. Go back to your homework. She hesitated, then disappeared. Marcus crossed his arms, positioning himself between Celine and the rest of his home. Say what you came to say. Celine reached into her bag, leather, expensive, probably Italian, and pulled out a tablet. She tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward him. A video played. Security footage, grainy and time-stamped, showing a flooded street, a car wrapped around a tree, and a man, Marcus, smashing through the window and dragging a woman to safety. The angle captured everything. The flames, the explosion, the way Marcus shielded her body with his own. This is you, Celine said. I know what I did. Do you know who I am? Marcus studied her face, searching for recognition. She looked vaguely familiar, the way people in magazines or billboards sometimes did, a face you'd seen but couldn't place. Should I? She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Celine Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries. The name hit him like cold water. Sterling Industries, the real estate conglomerate that owned half the city's commercial properties. The company whose logo was stamped on the side of his apartment building, on the eviction notices that went out every other month to tenants who couldn't pay. The empire built on glass towers and gentrification. You own my building, Marcus said slowly. I own a lot of buildings. You own the company that's been raising rent every year while refusing to fix the heat. I own the company that keeps this building standing. Marcus laughed, sharp and bitter. Is that what you call it? Standing? Celine's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around the tablet. I'm not here to debate property management. Then why are you here? She tapped the screen again, pulling up a different document. This is your lease. You're 3 weeks behind on rent. You have 2 more weeks before eviction proceedings begin. Marcus's stomach dropped. He knew the numbers, had been counting the days like a man counting bullets. I'm aware. I'm also aware that you refused payment for saving my life. What's your point? Celine set the tablet on the table, her movements deliberate. I'm paying your rent. For the year. Consider it settled. Marcus stared at her. No. Excuse me? I said no. Her eyes narrowed. You'd rather be evicted? I'd rather not owe you anything. You don't owe me. I owe you. Same difference. Celine took a step closer, her voice dropping to something colder, sharper. You have a daughter. She needs a home. You're going to let your pride put her on the street? The words were a knife between his ribs, perfectly aimed, brutally effective. Marcus felt his jaw clench, his hands ball into fists. Don't you dare use my daughter against me. I'm not using her, I'm stating facts. You need help. I'm offering it. I don't want your help. Why not? Because help from people like you comes with strings, and I've seen what happens when you pull them. Celine's composure cracked, just for a second, a flash of something raw and angry. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. You think because you write a check, you own people. You think gratitude is the same as leverage. That's not... Yes, it is. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low and steady. You didn't come here to help me. You came here to make yourself feel better, to turn a moment where you were powerless into something you can control. Well, I'm not your redemption project. Find someone else. The silence that followed was suffocating. One of the men by the door shifted, ready to intervene if things escalated. Celine held up a hand again, stopping him, her eyes locked on Marcus. You're wrong about me, she said quietly. Am I? Yes. Then prove it. Leave. For a long moment, Celine didn't move. Then she picked up the tablet, slid it back into her bag, and turned toward the door. She paused, her hand on the knob, her back to him. I grew up in foster care, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 12 different homes in 15 years. I learned early that the only person who'd take care of me was me. So I clawed my way up. I worked 3 jobs to pay for college. I built my company from nothing. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to be helpless, to need someone and not be able to pay them back. She turned, and for the first time, Marcus saw past the armor. Her eyes were glassy, her jaw tight, her entire body vibrating with the effort of holding herself together. Until that night, she continued, when I was trapped in that car, and I couldn't breathe, and I thought I was going to die. And you didn't ask who I was. You didn't check my wallet to see if I was worth saving. You just saved me. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't know how. Celine's voice cracked. So forgive me if I don't know how to say thank you without writing a check. It's the only language I've learned. She left before he could answer. The 2 men followed, closing the door behind them with a soft click. Marcus stood there, his heart pounding, his mind racing. He heard Ava's footsteps behind him. Daddy, why were you yelling? He turned, crouched down to her level. I wasn't yelling, baby. I was just talking loud. She seemed sad. Yeah, she did. Are you going to help her? Marcus pulled Ava into a hug, pressing his face into her hair. I don't know how, sweetheart. But the truth was, he did know. He just wasn't sure he was brave enough to do it. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying Celine's words over and over. I forgot what it felt like to be helpless. He understood that. He'd spent the last 3 years clawing his way through life, refusing help because accepting it felt like admitting defeat. Pride was a poison, and he'd been drinking it for so long he'd forgotten what it tasted like without the bitterness. The next morning, the knock came again. This time, Marcus opened the door to find a man in a suit, not one of Celine's guards, but someone older, professional, carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Cole? That's me. I'm David Brennan. I represent Ms. Sterling." He opened the briefcase and pulled out a document. "She asked me to deliver this." Marcus took the paper, scanned it quickly. It was a deed to his apartment, paid in full, transferred into his name. "What the hell is this?" "Ms. Sterling purchased the building. She's transferring ownership of your unit to you. No strings, no mortgage. It's yours." Marcus's hand shook. "I didn't ask for this." "I'm aware. But Ms. Sterling was insistent." Brennan pulled out a pen. "All I need is your signature." "And if I don't sign?" "Then the building remains in her name and your rent remains unpaid. Eviction proceedings will continue." It was checkmate. Celine had boxed him in, left him no way out that didn't hurt Ava. Marcus stared at the document, his mind screaming at him to refuse, to tear it up, to walk away. But then he thought about his daughter, about the way she deserved stability, safety, a home that couldn't be taken away. He signed. Brennan smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. Cole. You're a homeowner." He left, and Marcus stood there holding the deed, feeling like he'd just sold something he couldn't get back. That evening, he turned on the TV to distract himself from the gnawing guilt. The news was on. And then he saw her. Celine Sterling, standing in front of a microphone, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, "Sterling Industries CEO survives fiery crash. Rescued by local hero." Marcus's blood ran cold. The reporter's voice cut through the noise. "Ms. Sterling, can you tell us about the man who saved your life?" Celine's face was composed, professional. "He's a private citizen. I'm respecting his anonymity." "But he refused payment. Is that correct?" A pause. Then, "Yes. Why would someone refuse money for saving a life?" Celine looked directly at the camera, and for a moment Marcus felt like she was looking at him. Because not everything is for sale. The clip ended. Marcus turned off the TV, his hands shaking. He looked down at the deed on the table, at the signature that had just chained him to a woman who could buy and sell his entire world without blinking. And he realized, with a sinking certainty, that this was only the beginning. Marcus didn't leave the apartment for 2 days. He told himself it was because he had work to do. Mrs. Chen's sink was leaking again, and Mr. Ramirez needed help moving furniture. But the truth was darker and more paralyzing. He was hiding. From the deed sitting on his kitchen counter, from the news cameras that had somehow found his building and were camped outside like vultures. From the reality that Celine Sterling had turned his life into a story he didn't recognize. Ava noticed. She always noticed. "Daddy, why won't you go outside?" "I've got plenty to do in here, baby." "But you always go outside. You said fresh air is important." "It is, but not today." She climbed onto the couch beside him, her small hand finding his. "Are you scared of the pretty lady?" Marcus looked at his daughter, at the concern etched into her 7-year-old features, and felt something crack inside his chest. "No, sweetheart. I'm not scared of her." "Then why are you hiding?" Out of the mouths of babes. Marcus pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "I'm not hiding. I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About how to fix something I didn't break." Ava was quiet for a moment, then said, "Mommy used to say you can't fix everything." The mention of Sarah hit him like it always did, sharp and unexpected, a wound that had scarred over but never quite healed. "Your mom was a smart woman. She said some things just have to fix themselves." Marcus closed his eyes. Sarah had been good at that, at knowing when to step back, when to let the world settle into its own rhythm. He'd always been the one who charged forward, trying to force solutions, trying to engineer outcomes. It was why he'd been good at his job and terrible at accepting help. On the third day, the knock came at 6 in the morning. Marcus opened the door to find Celine standing there. No bodyguards, no suit, just jeans and a plain white t-shirt that looked borrowed from someone else's life. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders, and without makeup she looked younger, more vulnerable. She also looked exhausted. I know you don't want to see me, she said before he could speak, but I need you to hear me out. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. Marcus should have closed the door, should have told her to leave, to take her deed and her guilt and her cameras and find someone else to absolve her. But something in her voice, a rawness he recognized from his own mirror, made him step aside. Celine entered, moving past him into the living room. She didn't sit. She stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed, her entire body tense like she was bracing for impact. I made a mistake, she said. Marcus closed the door. Which one? All of them. The money, the deed, going on television. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't listening. I was just trying to control the narrative because that's what I do. I control things. It's how I survive. You don't have to survive me. I know that now. She looked at him, and her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. I've spent 20 years building walls, making sure no one could hurt me, no one could take from me, no one could make me feel small again. And you knocked them all down in one night without even trying. Marcus leaned against the door, his arms crossed, mirroring her defensive posture. I didn't do anything except what any decent person would do. That's the problem. I forgot what decency looked like. I forgot that not everyone wants something from me. And when you refused my money, it terrified me. Because if I couldn't pay you, I didn't know how to balance the scales. I didn't know how to walk away without owing you. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. Her voice cracked. You gave me my life back, and I repaid you by treating you like a problem to solve instead of a person to respect. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Marcus wanted to stay angry. Anger was easier than whatever this was, this messy, complicated thing that didn't fit into the neat categories he'd built his life around. But Celine wasn't hiding behind her money anymore. She was just standing there, exposed and honest, asking him to see her as something other than the enemy. Why are you really here? Marcus asked quietly. Celine took a breath, steadying herself. I want to make this right. Not by writing a check or buying a building, by actually helping. But I need you to tell me how. I don't need help. Everyone needs help. You're just too stubborn to ask for it. That's rich coming from you. She smiled, sad and self-aware. I know. We're the same, you and I. Too proud, too damaged, too convinced that needing someone makes us weak. Marcus felt the words land like stones in his chest because they were true. He'd been so focused on rejecting Celine's help that he'd forgotten what it felt like to accept it, to let someone else carry part of the weight. Sarah used to call it his martyrdom complex, this need to suffer alone because suffering with someone felt like imposing. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice tired. I want to start over. No money, no grand gestures, just two people trying to figure out how to be human with each other. Before Marcus could respond, Ava appeared in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She saw Celine and her face lit up. You came back. Celine's expression softened, the armor melting away entirely. I did. Is that okay? Yes. Daddy said you probably wouldn't, but I knew you would. You did? You left your invisible footprint, like in the story about the giant who comes back for what he forgot. Celine looked at Marcus, questioning. He shrugged. She reads a lot of fairy tales. I like fairy tales, Celine said, crouching down to Ava's level. Which one's your favorite? The one where the princess saves herself. That's a good one. Ava studied Celine with the brutal honesty only children possess. Are you going to be nice to my daddy now? Because last time you made him sad. Celine's throat worked, swallowing something painful. I'm going to try very hard to be nice to your daddy. I promise. Okay, but if you're mean, I'm going to be mad at you. That's fair. Ava seemed satisfied with this arrangement. She turned to Marcus. Can she stay for breakfast? I don't want runny eggs again. Despite everything, Marcus almost laughed. I'll do my best, baby. They ended up at the kitchen table again, but this time the dynamic was different. Celine didn't watch him cook. She helped, moving around the tiny kitchen with surprising ease, cracking eggs with more skill than he expected. They didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was careful, tentative, like two people learning a new language together. Ava kept up a running commentary about school, her friends, the weird smell in the cafeteria, the boy who'd tried to kiss her and gotten sent to the principal's office. Celine listened like every word mattered, asking questions, laughing in the right places, and Marcus found himself watching her instead of the stove. When they finally sat down to eat, Ava declared the eggs way better and proceeded to shovel them into her mouth while reciting the plot of her favorite movie. Celine ate slowly, savoring each bite like it was a meal at a five-star restaurant. "This is good," she said, and this time it didn't sound like a lie. "It's just eggs." "It's more than that." Marcus met her eyes across the table, and something passed between them, an understanding, maybe, or the beginning of one. They were still wary of each other, still carrying their respective wounds, but the hostility had shifted into something softer, more curious. After breakfast, Celine helped clear the dishes. Marcus told her she didn't have to. She did it anyway. They moved around each other in the small kitchen, a dance of proximity and distance, until finally Celine set down the dish towel and turned to face him. "I need to tell you something," she said. "And you're going to hate it." Marcus braced himself. "What?" "The news knows who you are. They've been digging. They're going to run a story tomorrow identifying you as the man who saved me." His stomach dropped. "How do you know?" "Because I still have contacts. People who owe me favors. They gave me a heads up." "Can you stop it?" "I tried. But the story's too big now. You're about to become very public, Marcus, and I'm sorry. This is my fault." Marcus sank into a chair, his head in his hands. He'd known this was coming, had felt it building like a storm on the horizon, but hearing it confirmed made it real. "I don't want to be famous for doing the right thing. That's not why I did it." "I know, but the world doesn't care about your intentions. They care about the narrative." "So what do I do?" Celine sat across from him, her hands folded on the table. "You let me handle it." "How?" "I'm holding a press conference tomorrow. I'm going to tell them the truth, that you're a private citizen who deserves to be left alone. I'll redirect the attention back to me where it belongs. It won't stop everything, but it'll slow it down." Marcus looked at her, searching for the angle, the hidden cost. "Why would you do that?" "Because I owe you more than money. I owe you peace, and I'm going to give it to you, whether you want my help or not." He wanted to argue, to tell her she couldn't fix this, but the determination in her eyes told him she was going to try anyway. "You really don't know how to let things go, do you?" "Not when they matter." The press conference happened the next afternoon. Marcus watched it from his couch, Ava beside him, her hand in his. Celine stood behind a podium, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. She looked every inch the CEO again, composed, authoritative, in control. "I want to address the speculation surrounding my rescue," Celine began, her voice carrying across the room. "The man who saved my life is a private citizen. He did not ask for recognition. He did not ask for payment. He simply did what he believed was right. And in doing so, he reminded me of something I'd forgotten." She paused, her gaze dropping to her notes, then lifting to stare directly into the cameras. "We live in a world where we measure everything by its price, where kindness is transactional and humanity is a commodity. But some things can't be bought. Some acts exist outside the marketplace. And the greatest gift I received that night wasn't my life. It was the reminder that decency still exists." The reporters erupted with questions. Celine raised a hand, silencing them. "I won't be taking questions about his identity. I won't be discussing his personal life. This story ends here. If you want to write about something, write about the thousands of people like him, the ones who help without asking for anything in return. They're the real heroes, not me." She stepped away from the podium, ignoring the shouted questions, and disappeared through a side door. The feed cut to the studio, where the anchors were already spinning the story into think pieces about altruism and modern society. Marcus turned off the TV. "She's really brave," Ava said. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "She is." 2 days later, Celine showed up at Ava's school. Marcus was there to pick up his daughter, standing among the other parents in the pickup line when the black luxury sedan pulled up. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. And then Celine stepped out, dressed in another power suit, her presence commanding immediate attention. She walked straight toward Marcus, ignoring the stares, the phone cameras, the sudden hush that fell over the crowd. She stopped in front of him, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk." Marcus glanced around at the watching parents, the curious teachers. "Now?" "Now." He followed her to a quieter corner of the parking lot, away from prying eyes. Celine pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward him. It was a video, security footage from the night of the crash, but from a different angle. This one showed everything. The way Marcus had run through the storm without hesitation, the way he'd smashed the window, the way he'd shielded her body with his own when the car exploded. The footage was crystal clear, devastating in its intimacy. "Where did you get this?" Marcus asked. "From the traffic cameras. I had my team pull every angle." She lowered the phone. "I watched this 50 times, and every time I see the same thing." "You didn't think. You just acted. You put yourself between me and death without knowing who I was, without considering the cost." So I need to know why. Not the generic answer, not the "it was the right thing to do" answer. I need to know what makes a man run into fire for a stranger. Marcus stared at her, feeling the weight of the question. "You really want to know?" "Yes." He took a breath, the words coming from a place he rarely accessed. "Because I couldn't save my wife. I watched her die in a hospital bed, machines beeping, monitors flashing, and there was nothing I could do. No window to break, no fire to fight, just slow, inevitable loss. And when I saw you in that car, I saw a chance to save someone, to be useful, to not feel helpless for once." Celine's eyes glistened. "Marcus, you asked. That's the answer. I saved you because I couldn't save her. Maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe that makes me a coward. But it's the truth." She reached out, her hand finding his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "That doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human." They stood there in the parking lot, two damaged people learning how to be honest with each other, until Ava came running over, backpack bouncing, face bright with joy. She saw Celine and threw her arms around the woman's legs without hesitation. Celine froze, clearly unaccustomed to spontaneous affection, then slowly, carefully, hugged her back. When she pulled away, her eyes were wet. "Hi, Miss Celine," Ava chirped. "Are you coming over again?" Celine looked at Marcus, questioning. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, she can come over." The smile that broke across Celine's face was genuine, unguarded, and beautiful. That night, they sat in Marcus's living room, Ava on the floor coloring, Marcus on the couch, Celine in the old armchair that squeaked every time she moved. They didn't talk about money or debt or obligations. They talked about small things. Celine's favorite book, Marcus's worst repair job, the time Ava tried to cut her own hair and ended up looking like a lopsided poodle. It was normal, almost comfortable. And for the first time since the crash, Marcus let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, this didn't have to end in disaster. Then Celine's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. "This is Celine." Marcus watched her face change, the warmth draining away, replaced by something cold and sharp. She stood, moving toward the window, her voice dropping to a tense murmur. "When? How many? No, don't release a statement yet. I'll handle it." She ended the call and stood there for a moment, her back to him, her shoulders tight. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked. "Marcus." She turned and her expression was pure steel. "I have to go. There's a situation at one of my properties, structural failure. People are trapped." Marcus was on his feet instantly. "Where?" "The Morrison Building, downtown." "I know that building. I worked on buildings like it. If the structure's compromised, they need to shore it up before they start evacuating, or the whole thing could come down." Celine stared at him. "You're an engineer." "Was. But yeah." "Come with me." "What?" "You know the building. You know the systems. I need you." Marcus looked at Ava, who was watching them with wide eyes. "I can't just leave her." "Bring her. My driver will take her somewhere safe. Please, Marcus. People could die." He saw it in her eyes, the same desperation he'd felt that night in the rain, the same helpless need to do something, anything, to stop the inevitable. And he understood, with sudden clarity, that this was her fire to run into, her window to break. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." They move fast. Marcus grabbed Ava, explained quickly that Daddy had to help with an emergency. Celine made calls as they ran down the stairs, her voice sharp and commanding, mobilizing resources Marcus couldn't even fathom. The sedan was waiting, engine running, and they piled in. The drive downtown was a blur of lights and speed. Celine's driver, a quiet man named Thomas, navigated traffic like he was playing a video game, cutting through gaps Marcus wouldn't have attempted on foot. In the back seat, Celine barked orders into her phone, pulling up building schematics on her tablet, coordinating with emergency services. "Talk to me," she said, handing Marcus the tablet. "What am I looking at?" Marcus studied the blueprints, his engineer's brain kicking into gear after years of dormancy. "This is a load-bearing wall system. If one section fails, it redistributes weight to the adjacent structures. You get a cascade effect. The whole south side could pancake. How do we stop it?" "Temporary support columns. Steel beams to redistribute the load while you evacuate. But you need to move fast. If there's any lateral movement, any shifting—" "How fast?" "Minutes, not hours." Celine's jaw tightened. She made another call. "I need structural engineers and a steel supplier at the Morrison building. Now. I don't care what it costs. Get them there." When they arrived, the scene was chaos. Fire trucks, ambulances, police barricades, people screaming, smoke pouring from the upper floors. Celine was out of the car before it fully stopped, Marcus right behind her. An officer tried to stop them. "Ma'am, you can't—" "I own this building," Celine said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "This is Marcus Cole. He's an engineer. We're going in." The officer looked uncertain. Celine didn't wait for permission. She pushed past him, Marcus following, and they entered the building through the service entrance. Inside, the damage was worse than the schematics suggested. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. The floor sagged in places. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. "Second floor," Celine said, coughing. "That's where they're trapped." They took the stairs, each step a risk, the building groaning around them like a dying animal. When they reached the second floor, they found a group of workers huddled in a corner, separated from the exit by a collapsed section of ceiling. A man stepped forward, mid-40s, hard hat, eyes wild with fear. "The support beam gave out. We can't get through." Marcus assessed the situation quickly. The debris was unstable, balanced precariously on a partially collapsed wall. Moving it wrong would bring down the rest. "I need rope and leverage, something to distribute the weight." Celine was already on her phone. "There are cables in the maintenance room, 3rd floor." "I'll get them," Marcus said, but Celine grabbed his arm. "We'll get them, together." They ran. Up another flight of stairs through hallways that threatened to collapse with every step, until they found the maintenance room. Marcus grabbed cables, pulleys, anything that could help. Celine carried what she could, her designer suit covered in dust, her face streaked with sweat. Back on the 2nd floor, Marcus worked fast, rigging a pulley system to lift the debris without shifting the weight dangerously. His hands moved with muscle memory, years of training flooding back. Celine helped, following his instructions without question, trusting him completely. "On 3, Marcus said. 1, 2, 3. They pulled. The cables went taut. The debris lifted, inch by agonizing inch. The workers scrambled through the gap, one by one, until the last person was clear. Then Marcus released the cable, and the debris crashed down, exactly where those people had been standing seconds before. The building shuddered. A deep, ominous groan echoed through the structure. "Run!" Marcus shouted. They ran. Down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the street just as the south side of the building collapsed inward with a deafening roar. Dust billowed out, choking the air, and Marcus pulled Celine down, covering her head as debris rained around them. When the dust settled, they were both coughing, gasping, alive. Marcus looked at Celine. She looked at him. And then she started laughing, high and almost hysterical, the kind of laughter that comes from surviving something impossible. "We did it," she said, disbelief coloring every word. "We actually did it." Marcus sat back on the pavement, his heart pounding, his hands shaking. "Yeah, we did." Celine reached over, grabbed his hand, and held it tight. Her grip was strong, grounding, real. "Thank you. For coming with me. For helping. For—" "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." Because you didn't have to come. You could have stayed home where it was safe. But you ran into the fire anyway. Marcus looked at their joined hands, at the way her fingers laced through his, and felt something shift inside him, something he'd thought was dead. Maybe we're both just too stubborn to stay away from burning buildings. Celine smiled, exhausted and genuine. Maybe. They sat there in the wreckage, two people who'd run toward danger instead of away from it, and Marcus realized that somewhere along the way they'd stopped being strangers. They'd become something else, something he didn't have a name for yet. But it felt like the beginning of an answer. The paramedics insisted on checking them both. Marcus sat on the back of an ambulance, letting a young EMT shine a light in his eyes, while Celine argued with the fire chief 20 feet away. Her voice carried over the chaos, sharp, authoritative, refusing to accept that the building couldn't be salvaged. Marcus watched her gesture at the structure, at the crews, at the chief himself. And he saw what everyone else probably missed. She wasn't angry about the building. She was angry that people had been in danger in the first place. "Your vitals are good," the EMT said, snapping Marcus back to attention. "But you inhaled a lot of dust. If you have trouble breathing tonight, go to the ER." "I will." "I mean it. Don't be a hero." Marcus almost laughed at that. He'd been called a hero twice in 1 week, and both times it felt like a lie. Heroes were people in movies, people who knew what they were doing. He was just a man who kept running toward things that should have sent him in the other direction. Celine finished her conversation and walked over, her suit ruined beyond repair, her face smudged with soot. She looked like she'd been through a war. She looked alive. "They're saying it'll take weeks to assess the full damage," she said, sitting beside him on the ambulance bumper. "Structural engineers, insurance adjusters, city inspections, the whole bureaucratic nightmare. Buildings can be rebuilt. People can't." Marcus glanced at her, surprised by the softness in her voice. "Everyone made it out. That's what matters. Because of you." She turned to face him, her eyes intense. "If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't known how to rig that pulley system, those workers would be dead. I would have stood there useless, watching people die in a building I own. You weren't useless. You helped. I followed your lead. There's a difference." Marcus shook his head. "You ran into a collapsing building without hesitation. Most CEOs would have stayed outside and let the professionals handle it." "I'm not most CEOs. I'm starting to figure that out." They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of sirens and shouting fading into background noise. Marcus felt the adrenaline draining from his system, leaving behind exhaustion and something else, something that felt dangerously close to connection. "I need to check on Ava," he said, pulling out his phone. It was cracked from the fall, but still functional. He dialed Thomas, who answered on the first ring. "She's fine, Mr. Cole. We're at a diner 2 blocks away. She's had 3 milkshakes and is currently teaching me about dinosaurs." Despite everything, Marcus smiled. "That sounds about right. I'll be there soon." He ended the call and stood. Celine stood with him, brushing dust from her jacket in a futile gesture. "I'll drive you." "You don't have to." "I know, but I'm going to anyway." They walked to where her sedan was parked, now covered in debris dust. The driver's side door had a dent from falling concrete. Celine stared at it for a moment, then shrugged and climbed into the passenger seat. Marcus got behind the wheel. She didn't even question it, just handed him the keys like it was the most natural thing in the world. The drive to the diner was quiet. Marcus navigated the downtown streets, now filled with news crews and curious onlookers drawn by the spectacle of a partial building collapse. He caught glimpses of himself and Celine on phone screens, grainy footage of them running into the building, emerging from the dust cloud, sitting on the ambulance. The story was already being written, shaped by angles and assumptions he couldn't control. "It's going to get worse," Celine said, reading his mind. "The attention, the cameras, they'll connect me to you, realize we've been spending time together. They'll build a narrative." "What kind of narrative?" "The kind that sells. Billionaire CEO and her rescuer. They'll make it romantic, dramatic, paint me as the damsel and you as the knight." Marcus tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "I'm nobody's knight. I know that. But they don't care about truth. They care about story. So what do? We ignore it. Live our lives. Let them write whatever fiction they want. Marcus glanced at her. You really think it's that simple? No, but I'm tired of letting other people's opinions dictate my choices. Aren't you? He didn't answer. The truth was complicated. He'd spent 3 years making himself small, invisible, forgettable. The idea of being seen, really seen, by the entire city terrified him more than running into burning buildings. They pulled up to the diner. Through the window, Marcus could see Ava sitting in a booth across from Thomas, her hands moving animatedly as she explained something with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could muster. Thomas was nodding like every word was gospel. She's something special, Celine said softly. Yeah, she is. You've done an incredible job raising her alone. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I had help. Her grandmother was there for the first year before she passed. And the neighbors, Mrs. Chen watches her sometimes when I'm working late. Takes a village, you know? Still, you're doing it. That takes strength. Or stubbornness. Maybe they're the same thing. They got out of the car and entered the diner. Ava spotted them immediately and launched herself at Marcus with enough force to nearly knock him over. Daddy, Thomas said you helped save people. Are you a superhero now? Marcus caught her, held her tight. No, baby. Just did what needed doing. Ava pulled back, studying his face with concern. You're all dirty, and you smell weird. That's what happens when buildings fall down. Did the building hurt you? Nope, I'm fine. She seemed satisfied with this answer and turned to Celine. You're dirty too. Do you want a milkshake? Thomas bought me 3. Celine smiled, genuine and unguarded. I think I need something stronger than a milkshake. Daddy doesn't keep strong drinks. He says they're expensive. Ava, Marcus started, embarrassed. But Celine laughed, a real laugh that made her eyes crinkle. Your dad's a smart man. They slid into the booth, Ava between Marcus and Celine, Thomas excusing himself to make calls. A waitress appeared, looking harried and tired, and took their order without really seeing them. Marcus ordered coffee. Celine ordered the same. Ava ordered a 4th milkshake, which Marcus vetoed in favor of actual food. You're no fun, Ava pouted. I'm plenty of fun. I'm also your father, which means vegetables. Miss Celine, do you make your kids eat vegetables? Celine's expression flickered, something painful crossing her features before she smoothed it away. I don't have children. Why not? Ava, Marcus said gently. That's personal. It's okay. Celine looked at Ava, her voice soft. I guess I never had time. I was too busy building my company, trying to prove I was worth something. You're worth something, Ava said with the absolute certainty of a child who hadn't learned doubt yet. Everybody's worth something. Celine's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly, but Marcus saw. He reached across the table, his hand finding hers, squeezing once. She squeezed back. The food arrived. They ate in comfortable silence, Ava narrating her day between bites. Something about a boy named Tyler who ate paste and a girl named Rebecca who could do a cartwheel. Normal, mundane kid stuff that felt like the most important thing in the world because it was normal. Because after running into collapsing buildings and facing down news cameras, normal was a gift. When they finished, Celine insisted on paying. Marcus let her, too tired to argue. They walked out into the cooling evening air, the sun setting behind the city skyline, painting everything gold and amber. Ava held both their hands, swinging between them like a bridge. Can Miss Celine come over again? Ava asked. Marcus looked at Celine. She looked back, her expression open, hopeful, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with money or power. Yeah, Marcus said. She can come over. That night, after Ava was asleep, Marcus and Celine sat on his couch. The same couch where he'd woken up to find her making coffee a week ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then, or maybe just a few very long days that had changed everything. I need to tell you something, Celine said, her voice quiet. Marcus turned to face her. Okay. That building, the Morrison, I knew it had structural issues. The engineers flagged it 6 months ago, recommended repairs, and I delayed them because the cost projections didn't align with quarterly earnings. I chose profit over safety. Those people were in danger because of decisions I made. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He let her words settle, understanding the weight of what she was confessing. You can't predict building failures. I could have prevented them. That's the difference. So what are you going to do? She looked at him, her eyes fierce. I'm launching an audit. Every property Sterling Industries owns, every building, every structure. Full safety inspections. No corners cut. No delays. And I'm establishing a fund for building maintenance and safety improvements, separate from operational budgets, protected from quarterly pressure. It'll cost millions. My board will fight me, but I don't care. That's a big decision. It's the right decision. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything. Yes, you did. You taught me that some things matter more than the bottom line, that profit built on other people's risk isn't profit, it's theft, that integrity costs something, but the alternative costs more. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the tight knot he'd carried since Sarah died, since he'd lost his job, since he'd started measuring his worth by how little he needed instead of how much he could give. You're going to change things, he said. Real things. That matters. I want to change more than just buildings. Celine moved closer, her leg touching his, her voice dropping to something intimate. I want to start a foundation for single parents, especially single fathers, who are working multiple jobs, barely scraping by, doing everything right and still falling behind. People like you, people the system forgot. Marcus's breath caught. Why? Because you showed me what strength looks like. Not corporate strength, not financial strength, human strength. The kind that gets up every day even when everything hurts, that chooses dignity over desperation, that raises a daughter to be kind in a world that punishes kindness. I want to support that. I want to honor that. That's... Marcus's voice cracked. That's a lot. I know. And I want to name it after you. The Cole Fund. No. Marcus. No. If you're going to do this, do it because it's right, not because you're trying to repay me, not because you're building a monument to your guilt. Do it because those people deserve help, not because I pulled you out of a car. Celine was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. You're right. I'm doing this for the wrong reasons. No, you're doing it for the right reasons with the wrong name. Call it something else, something that means more than one man's story. What would you call it? Marcus thought about Sarah, about the night she died, about the nurse who'd held his hand and told him it was okay to fall apart, about Mrs. Chen slipping him groceries when she thought he wasn't looking, about Mr. Ramirez teaching Ava Spanish while Marcus fixed his door, about all the small, invisible acts of humanity that had kept him standing. The Quiet Strength Fund, he said, for everyone who keeps going when no one's watching. Celine smiled, soft and real. That's perfect. She leaned in, and for a moment Marcus thought she might kiss him. His heart hammered, his breath hitched, but she just rested her forehead against his, close enough that he could feel her exhale, smell her perfume mixed with dust and sweat. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, the real me, not the CEO, not the money, just me. Thank you for letting me. They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breathing together, until Celine finally pulled back. She stood, smoothed her ruined suit, and moved toward the door. I should go. You need rest. Celine. She turned. Marcus stood, crossed to her, and did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He pulled her into a hug, a real one, the kind that said you matter without needing words. Celine stiffened for half a second, then melted into him, her arms wrapping around his back, her face pressed into his shoulder. When they finally separated, her eyes were wet again. Good night, Marcus. Good night. She left. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching her disappear down the stairs, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Celine launched her audit, and the media covered it like a revolution. Sterling Industries put safety over profit, read one headline. Billionaire CEO's moral awakening, read another. Marcus watched from the sidelines as Celine systematically dismantled the parts of her empire built on compromise and rebuilt them with integrity. She came over twice a week, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit and talk after Ava went to bed. They never discussed what they were becoming. There was no label for it, no neat category. They were just two people learning how to be honest with each other, how to exist in the same space without armor. Ava loved her. That was the easiest part. Celine taught her about business and astronomy and how to negotiate. Always know your value, she'd say, and Ava would nod seriously like she was taking notes for a future corporate takeover. Marcus found work coming easier. Word spread about his role in the Morrison Building rescue, and suddenly contractors were calling, asking for his expertise, real engineering work, the kind that used his degree, his training, his mind. He even got an offer from a firm downtown, decent salary, benefits, the whole package. He turned it down. Why? Celine had asked when he told her. Because I like what I'm building here. Small repairs, helping neighbors, being present for Ava. Corporate engineering would put me back in the same trap. Long hours, absent father, chasing something that doesn't feed my soul. You're choosing less money for more life. Yeah, I am. She'd looked at him with something like awe. I don't think I've ever met anyone who made that choice willingly. Maybe you're meeting the wrong people. I was, until I met you. The foundation launched quietly, without press conferences or fanfare. Celine had listened to Marcus's feedback. Make it about the people, not the story. The Quiet Strength Fund provided direct financial assistance, job training, childcare support, and mental health resources to single parents across the city. The response was overwhelming. Within 2 weeks, they'd received over 5,000 applications. Celine called Marcus at midnight, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't realize how many people were struggling. I mean, I knew intellectually, but seeing the applications, reading their stories. Marcus, there are parents working 3 jobs and still choosing between rent and food. Welcome to the world most people live in. How do you do it? How do you live like this without breaking? Who says I haven't broken? I break every day. I just wake up and put the pieces back together because Ava needs me to. You're stronger than me. No, I'm just more practiced at falling apart quietly. There was a long pause. Then Celine said, I need you. For what? For this, the foundation. I need someone who understands what it's like to be on the other side of the application. Someone who won't let me turn this into another corporate initiative. Someone who'll keep me honest. Marcus sat up in bed, fully awake now. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership, co-director of the Quiet Strength Fund. Salary, benefits, real decision-making power. You'd help select recipients, design programs, keep me from screwing this up with my blind spots. Celine, before you say no, think about it. Think about how many people you could help, how many families you could keep together, how many kids could have what Ava has, a parent who's present, who's not drowning, who can breathe. Marcus thought about it. Thought about the parents he'd met in this building, the ones who worked nights and missed school plays and aged 10 years and 12 months. Thought about the difference between helping one person at a time and helping hundreds. I need to think about it, he said finally. Take your time. The offer stands. 2 days later, Marcus said yes. The announcement was small, a press release buried in the business section, easy to miss. But the people who needed to know found out. Applications tripled. Donors appeared, other CEOs inspired by Celine's example, foundations looking to partner, individuals sending $20 because it was all they had. Marcus threw himself into the work with the same intensity he'd once brought to engineering. He read every application personally, called references, interviewed families. He built systems to ensure fairness, checks to prevent abuse, frameworks that treated people like humans instead of case numbers. Celine worked beside him, learning to see the world through his eyes. She visited recipients' homes, sat at kitchen tables, listened to stories that made her cry. She stopped wearing power suits to the office and started dressing like a person who had to move through the world instead of above it. They became a team. And somewhere in the long nights of grant writing and program development, somewhere between the laughter and the arguments and the shared victories, Marcus felt himself falling. It terrified him. He hadn't loved anyone since Sarah. Hadn't let himself feel that vulnerable, that open, that catastrophically human. Love was a luxury he couldn't afford. It demanded too much, broke too easily, left scars that never quite healed. But Celine wasn't asking for his love. She was just existing beside him, being herself, flawed and fierce and learning how to be kind without a manual. And somehow, that was more dangerous than any declaration. One night, after a particularly brutal day of denying applications because the fund couldn't help everyone, they sat in Marcus's living room, now slightly less threadbare thanks to Celine's insistence on buying a couch that didn't have duct tape, and shared a bottle of wine she'd brought. "I hate this part," Celine said, staring at her glass. "Choosing who gets help and who doesn't, playing deity with people's lives. It's not playing deity, it's making hard choices with limited resources. How do you live with it? By remembering that helping some is better than helping none. By knowing we're doing our best." Celine set down her glass and turned to face him. "You know what I realized today?" "What?" "You've been doing this your whole life, making hard choices, carrying weight you shouldn't have to carry, being strong for everyone else while you fall apart inside. And I've spent 20 years building walls to avoid exactly that. Your walls kept you alive. They also kept me alone." Marcus met her eyes, saw the raw honesty there, and felt his last defense crumble. "Celine, I'm falling in love with you." She said it simply, without drama, like stating a fact. "I don't know when it started. Maybe when you refused my money. Maybe when you ran into that building with me. Maybe when you taught Ava that vegetables were important. But it happened, and I needed you to know." Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs. His mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to protect himself, to not let this happen. But then he looked at Celine, really looked at her, and saw someone just as terrified, just as scarred, just as desperate for connection. "I'm scared," he said quietly. "Me too. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Neither do I. But I'm falling too. Have been for weeks, and it terrifies me because I don't know how to love someone without losing them." Celine reached out, her hand finding his face, her thumb brushing his cheek. "Then we'll be terrified together. And maybe that's enough to start." Marcus closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "Okay. Okay? Yeah. Okay." She kissed him then, soft, tentative, asking permission with every movement. Marcus kissed back, tasting wine and vulnerability, and something that felt like coming home after years of being lost. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Celine smiled. "That was, yeah," Marcus agreed, "it was." They didn't rush, didn't let the moment spiral into something neither was ready for. They just sat together, hands clasped, foreheads touching, breathing in sync. And for the first time since Sarah died, Marcus let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved this. Deserved love. Deserved happiness. Deserved a second chance at building something beautiful. Even if it scared him senseless. The kiss changed everything and nothing at the same time. Marcus still woke up on his couch, now the new one that didn't attack him with broken springs, and made runny eggs for Ava. Celine still showed up twice a week, though now she stayed later, leaving only when Ava was long asleep and the city had gone quiet. They moved around each other with a new kind of awareness, touches lingering a second longer, glances holding more weight. But they were careful, deliberate. Both of them too damaged to rush into something that could shatter them both. Ava noticed, of course. Kids always noticed. "Are you and Miss Celine boyfriend-girlfriend now?" she asked one morning over breakfast, her tone suggesting this was a perfectly reasonable question to ask while shoveling cereal into her mouth. Marcus choked on his coffee. "What?" "Tyler's mom has a boyfriend. He comes over and they hold hands. You and Miss Celine hold hands." "That's different. How?" Marcus searched for an answer that would satisfy a 7-year-old's logic without opening doors he wasn't ready to walk through. "Miss Celine and I are figuring things out." "So you like her?" "Yeah, I like her." "Good. I like her too. She's nice and she doesn't treat me like I'm dumb." "Nobody thinks you're dumb, baby." "Tyler does. He said girls can't be scientists." "Tyler's wrong. Girls can be anything they want." "That's what Miss Celine said too." Ava took another bite of cereal, thoughtful. "Can she be my mom?" The question landed like a punch to the chest. Marcus set down his mug carefully, buying time to breathe through the sudden tightness in his throat. "Sweetie, that's complicated. Why? Because being a mom is more than just liking someone. It's a big responsibility, and Miss Celine and I are still getting to know each other. But you love her, right? Marcus looked at his daughter, this impossibly perceptive human he'd somehow raised, and decided on honesty. Yeah, I think I do. Then she can be my mom. Ava said it with the absolute certainty of a child who hadn't learned that love didn't solve everything, that wanting something wasn't enough to make it real. Because when you love someone, they're family. Marcus pulled her into a hug, fighting back tears. You're pretty smart. You know that? I know. Tyler's dumb, but I'm smart. Despite everything, Marcus laughed. That afternoon, while Ava was at school, Marcus met Celine at the foundation office. A modest space they'd rented in a building Celine didn't own, deliberately chosen to keep the operation separate from Sterling Industries. She was on the phone when he arrived, her voice tight with frustration. I don't care what the lawyers say. We're not delaying the safety retrofits. If they don't like the budget impact, they can take it up with me directly. She paused, listening. No more meetings. This isn't a negotiation. Make it happen. She hung up and rubbed her temples, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Marcus set a coffee on her desk, the expensive kind from the shop 3 blocks over, the way she liked it. Rough morning? My board is pushing back on the audit costs. Apparently putting people's lives ahead of shareholder returns is fiscally irresponsible. What are you going to do? Tell them they can accept it or accept my resignation. She took a sip of coffee, her expression softening. Thank you for this. For coffee? For existing. For reminding me why I'm doing this when every voice in my head says to just play the game like everyone else. Marcus sat on the edge of her desk. You're not everyone else. No, I'm the woman who spent 20 years being everyone else and is now trying to figure out who she actually is. She looked up at him, vulnerable and honest. It's terrifying. Yeah, I know the feeling. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Celine pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and turned the screen toward him. I want to show you something. It was an email. From a woman named Patricia Chen, Mrs. Chen from his building. The subject line read, Thank you for saving my grandson's future. Marcus's breath caught. What is this? Read it. He took the phone, his hands trembling slightly, and read. Mrs. Chen's grandson, a kid Marcus had tutored occasionally in math, had been accepted to a STEM program through a scholarship funded by the Quiet Strength Fund. The program would cover everything, tuition, supplies, college prep. It was the kind of opportunity that changed trajectories, that turned might be into will be. This is because of you, Celine said softly. Because you refused to let me turn helping people into a transaction. Because you showed me what it looks like to care without expecting anything back. Marcus handed back the phone, his throat tight. I just told you my opinion. You did the work. We did the work, together. She stood, moving closer, her hand finding his. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. What are we doing? This... She gestured between them. What is this? Marcus took a breath. Ava asked me this morning if you could be her mom. Celine's eyes widened. What did you say? I said it's complicated, that we're still figuring things out. What do you want it to be? The question hung between them, enormous and terrifying. Marcus thought about the kiss, about the way Celine fit into his life like she'd always been there, about Ava's laughter when Celine taught her to negotiate for extra dessert. He thought about Sarah, about the guilt he still carried for being happy when she wasn't here to see it. I want it to be real, he said finally. But I'm scared I'm replacing her. Scared I'm using you to fill a hole Sarah left. Scared I'm being unfair to everyone. You, Ava, Sarah's memory. Celine cupped his face with both hands. You're not replacing her. Love isn't a finite resource, Marcus. You can love Sarah's memory and love me too. They're not in competition. How do you know? Because I see the way you look at Ava, the way you talk about Sarah. That love doesn't diminish what we have. It made you who you are, and I love who you are. Marcus pulled her close, burying his face in her shoulder. I don't know how to do this. How to build something new when I'm still carrying pieces of something broken. Then we'll build it together, broken pieces and all. They held each other in the middle of the foundation office, surrounded by applications and grant proposals, and evidence of lives changed, and Marcus felt something shift. Not healing. He'd learned that healing wasn't linear, that grief didn't have an expiration date, but acceptance. The understanding that he could carry Sarah with him and still walk forward. That evening, Celine came over for dinner. Marcus had attempted to cook something more ambitious than eggs: chicken, vegetables, rice that was only slightly burned. Ava set the table with the seriousness of a maitre d', arranging forks and napkins like she was preparing for royalty. "This is fancy," Celine said, taking in the scene. Ava insisted. "Because you're special," Ava announced. "Daddy said we should make it nice for special people." Celine's eyes glistened. She sat down, smoothing her napkin across her lap. "This is the nicest thing anyone's done for me in a long time." They ate together, the conversation flowing easily. Ava recounting her day with dramatic flourishes, Marcus interjecting corrections when her story veered too far into fiction, Celine laughing at all the right moments. It was domestic and normal and absolutely perfect. After dinner, while Ava brushed her teeth, Celine helped Marcus clean up. They worked in synchronized silence, handing dishes back and forth, moving around each other like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "I need to tell you something," Celine said, drying a plate. Marcus's stomach tightened. Those words never preceded good news. "What?" "The board called an emergency meeting. They're threatening a vote of no confidence." "Because of the audits?" "Because of everything. The safety measures, the foundation, the fact that I've been distracted by personal matters." She set down the plate, her jaw tight. "They think I've gone soft, that I'm compromising the company's competitive position by prioritizing ethics over profit." "What are you going to do?" Celine turned to face him, her expression fierce. "I'm going to fight. I'm going to stand in front of that board and tell them exactly what Sterling Industries is going to be. And if they don't like it, they can vote me out. I'll start over if I have to." "You'd give up everything you built?" "It's not giving up if I'm building something better." She moved closer, her voice dropping. "I spent 20 years building an empire, but empires are cold and lonely, and they crumble eventually. I want to build something that lasts, something that matters, even if it costs me everything I thought I wanted." Marcus pulled her into his arms. "You're incredible. You know that?" "I'm terrified." "Same thing, sometimes." Ava appeared in the doorway, pajamas on, hair damp from her abbreviated version of a shower. "Are you staying tonight, Miss Celine?" Celine glanced at Marcus. He nodded. "Yeah, baby. She's staying. Can she read me a story?" "If she wants to." Celine smiled. "I'd love to." Marcus watched them walk down the hall together, Ava's small hand in Celine's, and felt his heart expand in a way that was both painful and beautiful. This was it, the moment he'd been avoiding, the cliff he'd been standing at the edge of. He could step back, protect himself, keep everyone at arm's length, or he could jump. He chose to jump. The board meeting happened 3 days later. Celine asked Marcus to come with her, not to the meeting itself, but to wait outside, to be there when it was over. He sat in the Sterling Industries lobby, surrounded by glass and steel and money, feeling completely out of place in his best shirt and only tie. 2 hours passed. Then 3. Marcus was starting to worry when the elevator doors opened and Celine emerged. She looked exhausted but triumphant, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "What happened?" Marcus asked, standing. "I won. Barely. The vote was close, but enough board members sided with me to keep my position. We're moving forward with everything, the audits, the safety measures, the ethical restructuring." "That's incredible, Tom. It's terrifying. I basically committed corporate suicide. Our stock is going to take a hit. Some investors will bail. It's going to get ugly. But you're doing the right thing." "Yeah." She smiled, tired but genuine. "I am." They walked out of the building together, into the cool evening air. The city stretched out before them, lights flickering on as darkness fell, thousands of lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to map. Marcus thought about all the people in those buildings, the ones struggling to pay rent and feed kids and hold together lives that wanted to fall apart. thought about the ones the Quiet Strength Fund would help, and the thousands more they couldn't reach. "We're going to change things," Celine said, reading his thoughts. "Not overnight, not dramatically, but bit by bit, we're going to make this city a place where people like you don't have to choose between dignity and survival." People like me? People who do the right thing even when it costs them everything. People who refuse to compromise their integrity even when everyone else says that's naive. People who remind the rest of us what it means to be human. Marcus took her hand. "You give me too much credit." "No, the world gives you too little." They stood there on the sidewalk, letting the city move around them, and Marcus made a decision. Not an impulsive one. He'd been building toward it for weeks, maybe since the moment Celine stood in his kitchen making coffee. But still, it took every ounce of courage he had. "Move in with us." Celine's head snapped toward him. "What?" "Move in, with me and Ava. Not because you owe me, not because you're trying to fix something, but because I love you, because Ava loves you, because we want you there." Marcus, that's too fast, I know. And if you need time, that's okay, but I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself from the possibility of being hurt. I want to be brave enough to build something real. Celine's eyes filled with tears. "You're serious." "Completely. Your apartment is tiny. We'll get a bigger place, together, something that's ours." "I don't know if I'll be any good at this, at being part of a family. I've never done it before." "Neither had I before Ava. We'll figure it out together." She kissed him then, right there on the sidewalk outside her corporate headquarters, in full view of security cameras and passing strangers. It was a declaration, a promise, a leap of faith. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through tears. Okay. Yeah, let's do this. Let's build something real." The transition wasn't seamless. Celine was used to control, to perfection, to having systems for everything. Domestic life didn't work that way. She burned dinner, forgot parent-teacher conferences, got overwhelmed by the chaos of living with a 7-year-old who believed organization was for people without imagination. But she tried. Every day, she showed up and tried. Marcus watched her learn how to be part of something messier and more beautiful than any corporation. Watched her let Ava paint her nails in colors that absolutely did not belong in boardrooms. Watched her sit on the floor helping with homework, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and t-shirts that had paint stains and life stains. The Quiet Strength Fund grew. 6 months in, they'd helped over 200 families. Parents who'd been drowning found solid ground. Kids who'd been falling through cracks got caught. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something real and good and lasting. Marcus opened his own business, a small engineering consulting firm that specialized in affordable housing and community infrastructure. He hired other engineers who'd been pushed out of corporate firms, who valued purpose over profit. It was modest but meaningful, the kind of work that let him sleep at night. Ava thrived. She had 2 parents now, imperfect, learning as they went, but present. She stopped asking when Celine was coming over because Celine was always there. The question became, "Where are we going together?" instead of, "When will I see you again?" 1 year after the crash, Celine sat Marcus down at their new kitchen table, in their new apartment, the one they'd chosen together, and handed him an envelope. Her hands were shaking. "What is this?" Marcus asked. "Just open it." He did. Inside was a letter, handwritten on expensive stationery, the kind Celine used for important business correspondence. But this wasn't business. The words were personal, raw, honest in a way that made his chest ache. "Marcus, a year ago, I was trapped in a burning car, convinced I was going to die. You pulled me out, gave me my life back. But that's not what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that you refused my money, that you forced me to see myself clearly for the first time in 20 years, that you showed me what strength looks like when it's not performing for cameras or quarterly reports. I'm grateful for your daughter, who taught me that love doesn't require perfection, for your patience when I didn't know how to be part of a family, for your honesty when I was still trying to buy my way through everything. I'm grateful that you jumped off a cliff with me, even though we were both terrified. You saved my life that night, but you gave me a life worth living in all the days after. I don't know how to ask this the right way. I'm still learning how to be vulnerable without controlling the outcome. But here it is. Will you marry me?" Marcus looked up from the letter, his vision blurred with tears. Celine was crying too, her carefully constructed composure completely abandoned. "You're proposing to me?" he asked, his voice thick. "I know it's not traditional. I know men usually—" "Yes. Ask the women, and maybe you wanted to be the one who—" "Wait, what?" "Yes, I'll marry you." Celine laughed, the sound bright and disbelieving. "Really? Really?" She launched herself at him, nearly knocking over his chair, and kissed him with enough force to make him forget how to breathe. When they finally separated, both gasping, she pressed her forehead to his. "I love you," she said. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good. Terror means it matters." "Daddy? Miss Celine?" Ava's voice came from the hallway. "Why are you crying? Are you sad?" Marcus pulled back, wiping his eyes. "No, baby. We're happy." Ava appeared in the doorway, suspicious. "Happy people don't cry." Sometimes they do," Celine said, holding out a hand. Ava took it and let herself be pulled into the hug. "Sometimes happy is so big it spills over." "Is that what's happening now?" "Yeah, that's exactly what's happening." Ava seemed to accept this explanation. "Okay, can I be happy too?" Marcus scooped her up. "Always. Even when Tyler's being dumb?" "Even then." They stood there in the kitchen, a family built from broken pieces and second chances, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Complete. Not because the grief was gone or the past was erased, but because he'd learned to carry it forward instead of being crushed beneath it. The wedding was small, just close friends, a few colleagues from the foundation, Ava in a dress she'd picked herself that was somehow both princess fancy and entirely impractical. They held it in the community center where the Quiet Strength Fund had its office, surrounded by the families they'd helped. Celine wore white, but not a traditional gown, a simple dress that let her move, that didn't require an army of people to manage. She looked beautiful and real and absolutely terrified. Marcus wore the same suit he'd worn to the board meeting, the one that had witnessed the moment she chose integrity over empire. Ava stood between them, holding both their hands as they said their vows. Not vows about forever or perfection, but vows about showing up, about choosing each other even when it was hard, about building a life that honored both the joy and the pain. "I promise to love you on the days when love is easy and the days when it feels impossible," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tears. "I promise to see you, not the CEO, not the money, not the armor, but you. The woman who learned how to be vulnerable, the woman who chose people over profit, the woman who taught my daughter that strength comes in many forms." Celine's voice cracked when it was her turn. "I promise to keep learning, to keep trying, to keep showing up even when I don't know what I'm doing. I promise to love your daughter like she's my own, because she is. I promise to honor your past while building our future. And I promise that every day I'll try to be worthy of the gift you gave me when you refused to let me buy my way out of being human." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the ceremony, during the reception, which was really just pizza and music and people who actually cared about them, Patricia Chen pulled Marcus aside. She was crying, which was unusual for a woman Marcus had only ever seen as stoic and practical. "Your Sarah would be proud," she said simply. Marcus felt his throat close. "You think so?" "I know so. She always said you were too good for this world, that you'd give everything and expect nothing back. She'd be happy you found someone who gives back." "I miss her." "Of course you do. But missing her and loving Celine aren't contradictions. They're both true. That's how life works." Marcus hugged her, this neighbor who'd fed him and watched Ava and reminded him that community was just love wearing practical clothes. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Thank you for showing us all what kindness looks like." As the reception wound down, Marcus found Celine standing by the window, watching the city lights. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned into him with the ease of someone who'd finally learned to let herself be held. "Happy?" he asked. "Terrified. Happy. Both at once." "That's normal, I think." "Is it always going to be like this? This feeling like we're one mistake away from losing everything?" Marcus thought about it. "Probably. But we'll have each other, and Ava, and this life we're building. That's enough. Yeah, Celine agreed, turning in his arms to face him. It is. 3 years later, Marcus stood in the same foundation office where he'd first told Celine he loved her. But now the operation had expanded. 3 offices across the city, a staff of 20, partnerships with major corporations who'd followed Celine's lead. The Quiet Strength Fund had helped over 5,000 families. 5,000 lives changed because one woman refused to accept that profit was more important than people. Ava was 10 now, sharp and confident and determined to be the first female president, a goal Celine encouraged with the seriousness of a campaign manager. She'd started a club at school, Kids Against Injustice, and spent her weekends volunteering at the foundation, interviewing families with a clipboard and the businesslike demeanor of someone twice her age. Marcus ran his own firm now, employing 15 people, designing affordable housing that didn't sacrifice dignity for economy. He'd won awards he'd never sought, recognition he didn't particularly want. But the work mattered. Every building he designed was a statement. Poor people deserved beauty too. Celine had stepped down as CEO of Sterling Industries, not because the board forced her out, but because she'd done what she came to do, transformed the company into something ethical, something sustainable, something that proved profit and principle weren't mutually exclusive. Now she ran the foundation full-time, using her business acumen to scale impact in ways Marcus never could have imagined. They'd bought a house, a real one, with a yard where Ava could play, and rooms that didn't require duct tape to function. It wasn't mansion big, wasn't showing off wealth big. It was family big, home big. The kind of big that said, people live here and they're happy. On the anniversary of the crash, 5 years to the day, they returned to the spot where it happened. The tree was still there, scarred but standing. Someone had placed flowers at its base, though Marcus didn't know who. Maybe another life saved, maybe just someone who'd heard the story and wanted to mark the moment. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been there that night? Celine asked. Marcus considered it. Sometimes, but not in a way that hurts anymore. What way then? In a way that reminds me how fragile everything is. How one choice, one moment, one person can change everything. Celine took his hand. I'm glad you made that choice. Me too. They stood in silence, remembering the storm and the fire and the moment their lives intersected in the most unlikely way. Then Ava ran up. She'd been playing in a nearby park with friends and inserted herself between them with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted her place in their world. Can we go home now? I'm hungry, and Miss Chen said she's making dumplings tonight and invited us over. Marcus looked at Celine. She smiled. Yeah, baby, let's go home. As they walked away from the tree, away from the past, toward the life they'd built from ashes and broken pieces and stubborn refusal to give up on each other, Marcus thought about the price of decency, about how he'd almost lost everything trying to protect his pride, about how Celine had almost lost herself trying to protect her heart, but they'd found each other anyway. Two damaged people who learned that healing wasn't about becoming unbroken. It was about letting someone else see the cracks and choosing to stay anyway. That night, after dumplings with Mrs. Chen and Ava's lengthy explanation of her plan to reform the entire education system, after baths and bedtime stories, and the quiet moments when the house finally settled, Marcus and Celine sat on their porch. The city spread out before them, millions of lights representing millions of lives, each one carrying its own weight, its own story, its own possibility for transformation. I've been thinking, Celine said. Dangerous. She swatted his arm, smiling. I want to expand the foundation internationally, take what we've learned here and replicate it in other cities, other countries. That's ambitious. Is that a no? That's a, let's figure out how to do it right. Celine leaned her head on his shoulder. I love that about you. You never say no to making things better. You just ask how. Someone taught me that. This brilliant, stubborn woman who refused to accept that the world had to be the way it was. She sounds exhausting. She is. I'm going to marry her. Too late. You already did. Marcus kissed the top of her head. Then I'll just have to keep choosing her, every day, for the rest of my life. That's the plan. They sat there as the night deepened, holding hands, building dreams, proving that sometimes the best stories don't start with fairy tale magic. They start with a man who refused payment and a woman who learned what it meant to be human. They start with broken people choosing to heal together. They start with a storm, a fire, and the understanding that real strength isn't about never needing help. It's about letting someone help you anyway. And living every single day like decency isn't a transaction, it's just who you are.